The next 5 years of demand in this country and globally, for that matter, is never going to be higher for manufacturing, for metal fabrication, for machining across so many sectors.
One takeaway from our conversation is that no one customer mix is identical to another. No one fabricator is identical. Everybody has their sweet spot.
Know the business that you're in and focus on that. And things that aren't your core business, don't waste any time on.
Welcome to the Next-Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, we'll talk about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Want to level up your manufacturing or metal fabrication career? Fabricators and Manufacturers Association connects you with the education, training, and community you need to stay ahead. As an FMA member, you'll get access to exclusive resources, industry events, and a network of professionals who share your passion for making things better. Join today and start building your future in manufacturing at fmamfg.org. And now, back to the episode.
Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Next-Gen Metal Fab. This time we got a special guest with us today. We've got Jason Ray from Paperless Parts. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Tim. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
No problem. I've known Jason for years. I've known his partner, Jay Jacobs, for years. Paperless Parts has really kind of made an inroads into the sheet metal fabrication space and overall job shop space. But kind of just to get things started, Jason, just kind of bring me through your history, how you got involved with this industry, and also kind of the history of Paperless Parts back before it was Paperless Parts. Kind of bring me through the backstory.
So we started Paperless Parts a decade ago, and the vision of the company was largely how can we speed up innovation in the United States? And one of the bottlenecks to innovation was being able to go from a digital vision of a part, so something that had been designed in CAD, to a physical component. And when we dug into that process, we looked at the industrial supply chain, and the bottleneck really manifested in the estimating and quoting space, like getting responses, getting feedback, getting shops to take on your jobs was really hard. And I remember when we first started the business, my co-founder, Jay Jacobs, said to me, I want you to take these 50 parts and I want you to go get quotes and get as many quotes as you possibly can. And we went out to 40 different shops for quotes, and we got 2 responses. It was wild.
Right.
Wild. It just, people wouldn't touch it, wouldn't quote it, wouldn't respond, wouldn't answer their phones. Their websites were old. The cloud was scary. Like the industry is in a very different place. And I think much of what, to your guys' credit, you really push the industry to become more modern and to be more digital and to adopt new technologies. But when we first started this company, it was archaic. I mean, just absolutely incredible. My background, I come from military logistics. So I was a supply corps officer in the Navy. I got to see interactions with the Defense Industrial Base on both legacy part procurement and new program procurement. Quoting was the bottleneck there as well.
Yeah,
and general history of what parts you'd made.
Right. And kind of going back into the history, when I talk about you guys, my mind always goes back to Jay Jacobs and our first meeting. He owned a sheet metal fab shop in New Hampshire, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, it was rapid. So kind of bring me through how Jay got into the sheet metal business. I believe I asked this. This is an interview I had with him, I guess probably 2007 or 8 or something like that.
Yeah. So Jay realized that it took way too long to get prototypes for sheet metal components. We're talking, it would take weeks to get a quote and it would take months to get your components. And that process of prototyping sheet metal parts, he basically realized that if he sold time instead of selling parts, it would command a premium and it would allow him to build a really successful business where he could continue to reinvest in the business and scale it. And so that's what Jay did. The whole concept of Rapid was selling time and making it really easy to do business with them, very quick to get quotes from them. And I ended up meeting Jay right when I left the military. I was searching for mentors and looking for folks to help me. I wanted to go out and buy machine shops. I thought it'd be great to go solve the problem I was seeing and be a partner to the defense industrial base by owning a shop and actually doing something physical. So Jay agreed to be a mentor, and he joined my advisory board for a search fund that I had set up. And we spent a year looking at businesses to buy, and we didn't end up getting a deal done. I mean, every shop we went into, I would walk out and I'd look at Jay and I'd say, I don't know how I'm going to run that shop when that person leaves. Like, it just did not feel possible. The businesses were run by brute force. They were good, not bad businesses per se, but it just felt like the owners were this linchpin that if that tribal knowledge walked out the door, the thing was going to fall over sideways. So we ended up not doing that. But Jay encouraged me to look at the industry and look at what I had seen and write up a summary of the problems. And when I presented him that summary, this was in 2016, Jay's like, this reads like a business plan for a software company. And I said, well, I don't know anything about software, Jay. Like, I'm a Navy guy that, was a retired, frat guy. Like, I'm not a software guy. I'm an econ major. And he said, doesn't matter. And he said, you'll figure it out. And those words, you'll figure it out, are words that Jay has said to me for a decade plus now. He's like, move up to Boston. He's like, and oh, by the way, call it Paperless Parts. And he like gets up and walks out. And all right, so I'm selling my house in Virginia, moving to Boston. 3 months later, I was in Boston. We had incorporated Paperless Parts. We'd brought on an amazing CTO and co-founder, Scott Sawyer, who was the brains behind building out Paperless Parts. He's still here. He's our chief scientist today. He owns all of our development around AI and investing in security and making sure those models add value for customers. And over the last 10 years, we've scaled the business. We have over 800 customers today. We see tens of billions of dollars of quotes go through the product every quarter. Um, it's it's really cool. We just had our Power User Conference. We had 300 of our customers in Boston for the event. Um, and I think we're starting to solve the problem that we were seeing. Our customers are very rapid to respond, very quick, and they have a centralized place where all of the data from the estimating process lives.
When I visit a shop, usually, I visit two kinds of operations, one for with product lines, one that are contract fab. Contract fab is the vast majority of where I go, but a lot of times there's a high mix product line. And especially when I go to the product line operations, I'm a big geek about the goal and Eli Goldratt and theory of constraints. And I always go and say, all right, what's your constraint process? And I kind of look at those constraint processes. They may move between welding and forming and painting, but I always, really focus all my editorial on. It's like, okay, what are you doing to manage everything around that constraint? But then in fact, in recent years, and the more articles I've written about quoting and estimating, and the more articles that I've written about getting the front end right. And again, we worked together on an article recently about the nature of estimating and how estimating is kind of at the central of any kind of job shop, contract, fab business, no matter what you want call it, that the estimator really kind of shapes, or the estimating function, I should say, shapes the entire business. So kind of expand on that if you could, as far as how you choose markets, you set prices, and you calculate costs, and then you strategize in between to see where you want to grow the business.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Estimating is a garbage in, garbage out process. If you allow garbage into the business, it it is an anchor that you just drag, and it drags on your efficiency everywhere. Like, I think of estimating as such an important step in the business because it really is the triage process, if you will, for what the business is going to take on. And especially going into today's environment, like, one of the key points from our Power User Conference and our keynote is the next 5 years of demand in this country, and globally for that matter, is never going to be higher. Like, this is the pinnacle of demand that our country has ever seen for manufacturing, for metal fabrication, for machining, across so many sectors. And when I look at it and I look at the estimating process, our most successful customers, they define what we call the ideal part profile. And what that means is they get very, very disciplined about what they say no to and what they take on because they have a really strong understanding of what their organization is optimized to do. And on the back end, when we see customers struggle or when we go look at shops that have been 5 million in revenue for the last 20 years, they're buying a new machine to try to support a new potential job. They're out there, trying to figure out how to solve for a very specific feature that they need to go spend hours of putting their own ingenuity into. And it's great. Like they take an enormous amount of pride in figuring out problems. The challenge is they don't get paid for that. And when you don't get paid for the work that you do, it's really, really hard to scale and reinvest in your business and specializing. I mean, you look at Rapid was built around the Southwest Airlines business model. Like that was Jay's guiding principle was Southwest. And I don't know how much you know about Southwest.
Yeah, I mean, fast turnaround and yeah.
Well, but not just so much the fast turnaround, but the uniformity of everything. The same planes, the same configurations, the same tech, the same everything was exactly the same. So that there was redundancy at every position. There was a very high consistency. You didn't have to, you'd have to stock backup parts for 10 different airplane platforms. And that business model allowed him to be incredibly successful. You walk into a lot of shops today and it's kind of a over optimization that isn't all that strategic. They've got some machines from one company, some machines from another company. They've got machines that do something else from a different company. They're still riding on a legacy machine that they've had for 15 years. It's like the amount of overhead burden that it takes to just stay up with operating that, you make the business very, very complicated. I think the customers we see scale, like go very, very quickly, they get really disciplined about what they do. They define it and then they scream about it.
Right.
And they tell everyone that this is what we're the best at. And they specialize and they just seem to take off.
And yeah, what you're talking about are guardrails for the product mix coming in, going, okay, we're going to quote these, we're not going to quote these. It can't be too broad because if that's outside of our funnel, so to speak, it's going to require extra work, extra variability that we're not going to get paid for, and not a guarantee of scaling up in the future with this customer. We don't know. I mean, there may be not, and there are rules in place for that. But yeah, as far as now, what's interesting, that's one thing I did know about Jay's shop as far as the uniformity of his machines. So was it like all the same kind of lasers, all the same kind of machine? Was it like I think he had Haas machines, right? Like all machining, all the same
machining center, all the way down to the same tools in every machine.
Yeah,
yeah.
And that can seem counterintuitive because you said, well, I'm leaving money on the table because I've got all these quotes, this demand coming in for all these things that are on the fringes. Wow, that looks like a great opportunity. But hey, but then you can't be everybody to everything.
Well,
or everything to everybody. Switch that.
Yeah. That's the thing that I think the understanding of opportunity cost is really critical. And I think so much of, and this comes back to inconsistent demand. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of the folks in this industry built the business the way they had to survive in the macroeconomic environment that was the United States industrial base over the last 25 plus years. I think that's fantastic. Like, and they've survived and they built businesses and they're profitable and they've taken care of their families. And I would never take anything away from that. And what I'm talking about today is making sure that people are aware of what the industry is going to look like over the next 5 years. Because what's the book? What got you here won't get you there. Like, there is an opportunity right now that you will either take advantage of or you won't. And that is consistent demand. Consistent demand allows you to say no, knowing that you're not going to miss payroll because you don't have enough work to fill your machines. There will be
Right.
such a consistent demand over the next 5 years that I think saying no and making sure you optimize for the parts that you are best at producing and not the parts that you need to try to figure out how to produce, I think is just going to be absolutely critical.
Right. And it's especially with that, actual versus cost, cost estimate versus actual estimate versus price comparison to evolve that, saying this is our sweet spot. This is where we want to make the most. Now, in sheet metal, there's an extra wrinkling of complexity with nesting, so to speak, where you have. I know a lot of shops. I mean, it's most fab shops have some stamping capability, especially larger fab shops, and obviously some stampers are getting into fab for the lower quantity stuff. But for that higher quantity stuff, the material yield is so critical. And so nesting becomes ever more important, and yet you also need rapid response. And so then you have grouping like materials together. And so kind of describe the importance of nesting on the front end, as far as in the quoting stage or in the engineering stage, how it should be handled on the front end to describe an opportunity, because that almost defines your sweet spot in metal fab, saying, "Hey, does this fit within our nesting while not disrupting our flow?"
Yeah. And what a topic that people will debate long after we're out of this industry, I think. I think nesting is such a heavily debated topic when it comes to estimating. So I think it very much depends on what your customer is buying. If your customer is buying speed and time, nesting is a waste of time. And it's a waste of your margins. You're effectively competing against where you can optimize. I'd also argue that in a low quantity, nesting makes no sense because once it gets out to the shop floor, you're going to nest it differently with whatever jobs you have that are for the same types of material, which also comes back to the importance of defining your ideal part profile. If you're the best at making parts out of a specific type of material, great. Make that really, really clear to your customers. Make it so clear to them that they communicate to their engineers and they update their designs. Like some of the biggest companies in the industry right now are imposing their will. Like go back to Proto Labs as an example. Proto Labs shaped a generation of parts because people designed for Proto Labs capabilities. That's how influential they were. And every shop has that capability if you communicate.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
You have to communicate up to your customers. What is optimal? What is not optimal? Why is it better for both of you? How do you drive that partnership forward? I think more and more of that almost vertical integration type behavior is what's happening and what you're going to see be the future, especially as we have our own industry hyperscalers. Like if you look at the Fab 40 list and the roll-ups that are happening in sheet metal fabrication today, we're going to have some like close to billion-dollar businesses formed over the next 12 months that are going to partner very, very closely with their OEM customers. So I think it behooves every shop to go out and do that and communicate where you're specialized. Now, going back to understanding nesting, you got to understand what you're selling. Because if you're selling time, sell time and get a price back quickly with a fast lead time. And you don't worry about the scrap because that's not what the customer cares about. There's an opportunity cost. If you're selling unique capability, meaning I'm taking this from a piece of metal to a finished drop shipped product, like we have a customer that goes from sheet metal to microwave, not like industrial microwave, and they send it drop shipped to the buyers. That's totally different business. A totally different business. You don't do you nest it? Sure. Did you nest it in your quote? No. Like there's no reason for that. Doesn't matter. It's such a small percentage of the job being done that it just is not that important. Sure,
Right.
they optimize it when it gets to the shop floor, but that's their ability to go and generate higher margins.
So, so it really depends on how long basically the value add chain is or the job routing is. So if it's cut only, for sure, because that's what because it's
just
cut
look at
only in high quantity for and then for sure. But if
look.
if 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 you're going all the way down the job routing to assembly, drop ship, white label it, and out the door, you have a different value proposition.
I always ask people, what is the percentage of the job that is the metal cost?
Right.
If it's 50% of the job, yeah, you probably have to nest it. Like, makes a lot of sense. 10-15% fudge rate there will push you right out of win. I think flat part cutting today is highly competitive. Highly competitive. And I would argue that you may have to nest everything there to try to stay competitive, but then I would just ask the question of, if that's what you have to do to win it, is it worth filling your laser with that work?
Right. It depends on it. That it goes back to your ideal part profile. What's the precision of this work, and also I like to always, when I talk to fab shops, I was like, well, have you communicated tolerance requirements too? That's another thing during the quoting stage, and the faster you can make quoting as far as guess what, if you loosen these tolerances a bit, we can reduce your cost significantly because the variability plummets and we can just shove this through the shop, no problem. Do you
Oh,
see that
absolutely.
in your customer base?
100%. Our customers are constantly communicating with their customers, either through our product, so using external file sharing and collaboration around the actual files themselves, or just going back to customers communicating on the quotes. So they'll put notes on every line item that explain, what are the options? What could you do? What are ways to optimize this, make it go faster? Like, sure, it takes a little bit longer to like add those thoughts. And I think the mistake is people think that by doing that, giving the customer the details on how to optimize, they're giving away their IP. Like, oh, I wouldn't want to put that on the quote. And it's like, no, no. Like, what are they going to do? Take your quote and send it to another shop? No, you're the shop that gave them the thoughts. Like, 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100, they're just going to come back to you and work with you because they trust you're going to do that in the future. So I think that is a little bit of an older school mentality that we don't see pervasive across our customer base.
Kind of goes back to what I like to call the metal fabrication hero versus the metal fabrication business, where the metal fabrication hero takes those tolerances and they make it work. And it's just the heroic effort on the shop floor. And look at this is incredible. And then the business guy goes, yeah, but wait a minute now, we lost money on that, and let's figure this out. What's interestingly, one of the best read articles on the Fabricator.com is an article about dimensional forming tolerances and do they really need to be that tight? It's been shared ridiculously throughout the supply chain because everybody's like, look at this.
I
Look
can
how much
only
cost we could look how much cost we could reduce.
it just comes back to what you take pride in. Do you take pride in making money, or do you take pride in making parts? Like the most critical, most difficult parts. I think as business owners, you need to take pride in building profitable businesses. And
Right,
say it's hard. Like, people that like to solve problems find it really hard to say no to a problem. And that is
right.
really tough because most of the people that founded job shops and built these businesses with their bare hands were problem solvers. But I think that's what you're seeing change in the industry right now. And it's going to be a paradigm shift. We are seeing so many of these businesses change hands right now to either the next generation or a new, kind of a new format of owner that is much more focused on building a profitable, scalable business.
Right, right.
So that's going to reshape things quite a bit.
And there are two sides to that because the larger shops I'm talking to, some of them tell me that they're kind of shedding the lower quantity, less sustainable work and keeping the high productivity, high profit. They're homing in their customer base. But on the other side of that, there's always that fear that, well, are you cutting off future opportunity? But the challenge is with the shop is how it's designed. they have a they may have a dedicated design, rapid response cells. I know Jay had that back in the day. They had rapid
Oh yeah.
response cells, but then they have some shared resources, obviously in laser cutting, and also there's only so much capacity, and then there's a ramp up, and so that transition to production, there's always a new product introduction process, and those are always in place, but to actually have both to prototype and production. How do you handle that on the quoting end?
Um, so when you say that, you mean how do you approach quoting both production and prototype work?
In other words, all right, you're tackling prototype with the thought that, hey, it's going to ramp up over time, but how do I reliably ramp that up to ensure I have capacity and I'm not losing my shirt on this job?
Yeah. And part of it too is how do you communicate to the customer that there's one price for a prototype and there's another price once we get this to production,
Right.
without scaring people away. Like we've seen it a lot of times where our our prototype customers, they don't even get a bite at the apple on the production work. They don't
Right.
even get a shot because the buyer's already discounted them as a prototype shop that would never be a cost-effective way to produce the parts.
Right.
I
Right.
always tell people, I'm like, quote quantity breaks. Make sure you do it. And if a buyer comes to you and it's prototype quantities, I would fire right back to them. We're also going to include just a handful of quantity breaks so you can see how the pricing scales. Why not? If it's easy to do in your quoting software, just do it. Even if someone's coming and says, "Hey, I want 25 of these." Great. I'm going to quote you 25. I'm going to quote you 100. I'm going to quote you 250, 500 and 5,000 just so you can see how the quantities scale. Easy. And if you have the right software in the front office, you can go through the estimating process, and for 25 you can build in all the yields and all the risk and all the increased margins that make doing 25 worth it and doing 25 fast worth it. You can even build in expedite options that capitalize on buyers that want the prototypes really fast. We have customers do that all the time. And then when you're out at 5,000, you can nest that. You can figure out exactly what that job is going to look like from a cost perspective. You can really turn the dials on it, understand the lead times, the amount of cut time you're going to have, and then, send those quotes out, send it out together. And when the person's like, "Oh my God, you're telling me that buying a prototype is like 5 times as expensive as buying production quantity," you say, "Yeah, absolutely."
Right. Of course.
Like,
And
of course it is. Like, I wouldn't even be apologetic about it. Like, yeah, like, yeah, it is. And I just wanted you to know that when we dial this in, which we'll do, and we turn it into production manufacturing, you're going to have a much more cost-effective price.
right.
And
Yeah.
the customers that have adopted that mentality, they get the bites at the apple. They really
Right.
do.
And
And
and then yeah, the dialing in too also comes into costing. And we had talked about recently between activity-based costing versus heuristic pricing, which are two different concepts. Kind of talk through that and how that relates to this, where as you ramp up, the activity-based costing perhaps becomes more valuable, but for low volume or one-offs or complex work that you're likely never going to see again, trying to count every piece of hardware.
oh my gosh.
That gets into the weeds that there's no path out of.
And it comes back to a slide that I used to show in presentations where you just apply the cost of quoting to the value and volume of the jobs with your win rates. And I'll send you this slide, but it's basically you look at a job and you look at the average win rate and call it 30%. And it's like, okay, it takes me an hour to quote each of these jobs, and each of the jobs is $1,000 a job. So I quote 10 jobs and I win 3 of them. I've just spent 10 hours of my time to quote and win $3,000 worth of work, right? On the other end, if I have jobs that are, call it $10,000 a piece, and I quote those and I win 3 of them, I've just spent 10 hours to win $30,000 worth of jobs. And it's like, okay, what is my cost of quoting? Well, if my time is $50 an hour, 10 hours is $500, $500 on top of $3,000, that's a lot of money. We're talking like double digit percentages. What is it, 15% or something like that of that total, total revenue. That's a high cost of quoting, where $500 on top of 30,000 is what, 1.5%? That's much, much smaller. So it's, I think looking at it from that perspective, you have to decide very, very quickly whether a job is going to produce the right upfront investment. And I think the mistake a lot of people make is thinking, I'm going to put a ton of time into this because it could turn into production work. And they don't waste time asking the question. Like the big shops today, when they get their RFQs, they have something that goes back to the buyer that says, we want to know what your estimated annual usage is on this. We want to understand, is this going to be production? Do you want to put an LTA in place? Like, oh, you don't want to tell us? Well, fine, go buy it from someone else.
Right.
Like we need to understand it so we know how much time to spend on bidding this job. And they kind of push it back to the buyers. And that can be very quick with a phone call. Just, hey, want to quickly understand, is this one-off? Is this something that you're going to want on a repeatable basis? What does that look like? And then they put that right into Paperless Parts and they track that information. Um, I think that's a huge part of this triage process. But you asked the question, how do you go from heuristic to activity-based quoting? Well, let's look at nesting as an example. The heuristic might just be taking the, multiple of the cost of the metal. Like if I'm making one part, I may just look at it and say, you know what, this job is probably going to take 10 hours, once I get through welding and everything else. And, I know the cost of the metal is X, and okay, fine, just slap a price on it, get it out the door. Um, when I go to activity-based costing in paperless, I'm gonna nest it. So I'm gonna put it in our nesting algorithm. I'm gonna look at optimizing it, try to optimize sheet size. I'm gonna go in. I'm probably gonna try to understand how many people actually have to be involved in producing it. So, what do the bends look like? What are the lengths? What are the weights? What does that feel like? And really go down. That's what I love about quoting sheet metal. It's so formulaic. Like you can actually build the formula to get to true activity-based costing. A little bit more complicated in machining because machining's still a little bit of an art form. I don't want to take anything away from sheet metal fabrication, but it is very, very formulaic.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that allows for incredible optimization in the front office.
What's interesting though is if you look at a Gantt chart of most jobs, yeah, the actual tool touch time is literally a few hours, or maybe even a few minutes sometimes, especially if it's just one part. But if you look at what takes the most time is the queue time, and it's the time in between because they're managing 10,000 other jobs. So how do you account for that?
It's a really good question. I think it very much depends. Um, Very much depends on the specific customer and how you're handling it. So if something's just sitting in a queue and not doing anything with it, that's one approach. If it's a lot of touch time to prep the job, to understand the PO, like we have customers that actually go in and they have customer specific pricing based on how difficult the customer is to work with. And it's like if I have to spend 2 hours processing your PO because it's full of terms and I have to understand that, I have to read them and I have to make sure I understand all the gotchas. Well, that gets billed out. And I think the mistake is putting that into overhead. I think you can artificially inflate your overhead costs for customers that don't deserve that by being a little bit too lax with your activity-based costing, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense, and it actually kind of harks back to I don't know if you've read any of Rajan Suri's stuff at Quick Response Manufacturing QRM Center, but he promotes that fact of just hey, let's allocate all these costs to a specific jobs. It's like no,
Yeah.
don't just dump it all into overhead.
We,
So,
I mean, we've seen that in so many situations. And I think shops get into that motion because they're trying to quote quickly and it is easier to not have to go draw it all out. So they say, well, we're not going to account for moving the material around. And we're not going to account for whether this is on a forklift. And we're not going to account for, putting this in the time saver because everything runs through the time saver. So whatever, just treat it as normal process. And we're not going to account for part washing because that's not a big deal. And you start to like strip away the activities so that you can very quickly get to a price. And then layer your burden in, and great, I've got my hourly rate and I've got my burden and I've got my material cost, and all right, done, fired out. You don't have to do that anymore.
Right.
Like I think that's the truth of it. Like you had to cut those corners to try to be fast before, and you had to take a lot of jobs on risk. If you're using the right software in the front office, you do not have to unnecessarily take on that risk. And I think, we had talked about early on in the conversation the role of the estimator. The role of the estimator used to be your guard dog. Like they were your gatekeeper for letting garbage onto the shop floor. The estimator would make or break the business. That's why so many of the owners held the keys to the castle forever. Most of the businesses I looked at acquiring, the owner did all the estimating. I mean, that was one of the biggest ahas of starting paperless parts. It's like, my gosh, the first thing I'm gonna have to do is learn how to quote parts. But you end up in this situation where you don't have to be in that you don't have to have your hands tied that way anymore. You really
Right.
don't. Software can help you solve those problems, which can
Yeah.
allow you to be really, really accurate with your activity-based costing. And that's
And and that's huge because and especially if you just walk through the shop floor, I've been to many shops where, especially with the high-powered fiber lasers these days, and they're cutting plate, and you go to the denesting station, and it's loud because they got a lot of hammers, and it's just hammering through. And I'm going, I wonder if they accounted for that.
no way.
And yeah, and if you account for these things, this goes back to nesting and beam control, and because we've gotten questions about how to optimize the beam and to lift these things out because this is important. I guess the secondary costs there, but if it's at least accounted for up front, then it's an issue, and then it almost can drive improvements downstream. So it's not just kind of this hidden manual process that nobody pays attention to or just takes for granted. And I think that kind of really can drive continuous improvement. In fact, it was one of my favorite comments that you made. I believe it was Power last year at your conference, where you said during your initial address, like before you start anything, do a process map.
Yeah.
And not even software, just a whiteboard, get about 300 post-it notes. What does it take from quote to cash all the way through?
Follow it. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
I
kind of talk about that.
I love it. So the first time I ever watched someone do a process map, I was in the Pentagon, and um there was an additive demonstration facility down at Oak Ridge. And this I was talking to this commander, and the parts kept coming out um randomly not good. Like you'd have layers be off, you'd have the parts be, you know, just porosity where there wasn't porosity before, could not figure out what was happening. All random. And so I was talking to this commander, and he's like, so what I did is I slept in the facility, and I didn't sleep, but I just stayed there. And I wrote down every single thing that I saw happen. Everything. Every move, every light turn on, everything that happened. The air conditioning kicked on, I wrote it down. And he's like, you know what I figured out? I figured out that on the cart that they were using to take the parts out of the machines, the bolts had become magnetized. And when they would go buy the metal additive machines, it would throw off the lasers. And they would go buy them at all random times because all the machines were finishing builds at different times. And that's what was causing the problem. And that just like that story stuck with me for the next 2 decades, basically. And I think about that all the time. And I was just in a business the other day, and they were telling me about this consulting firm that came in to help them. And they said, okay, well, this is going to be very expensive. We're going to charge you $1 million as a consulting firm. But if you don't generate 3 times your return on that $1 million in the next 6 months, we'll give you your money back. And we will do the numbers, and we'll actually show you in your financials that you've generated 3 times the money. So no risk. So this firm comes out, and they literally set up camp in the shop and they sleep in the shop round the clock. They're there. They're clocking everything. And the owner that I was talking to, he said, he's like, it absolutely transformed my business. Like mind blowing. But it all comes back to process. It's, do you build a process map? Do you track that process? Do you write down what the steps are? Do you understand how far someone has to walk? I was in a shop the other day that has they ordered these robot waitresses or waiters, or robot delivery vehicle, if you will, but it looks like a waiter in a restaurant. They got them on Baidu, and these things go from tooling, central tooling, to they're mapped to all the work centers. And so someone needs tools or they need something, walkie talkie, the waiter, no humans walking around. It was wild. And these things were like 2 grand, 2 grand, saved everybody time. But it all came back to when they started process mapping, they started writing down how far people had to walk and how much time it was taking to go from machine to machine. And they said, we got to stop this. So dramatically improved the efficiency of the shop. But it's just, I'm all about process mapping. I just don't think, I think manufacturing is such a process driven activity that if you want to try to improve something without breaking it, you need to understand what the current process is.
Yeah, and it also it drives not only your capital investment, but also tackles the low hanging fruit. I talked to a shop recently, did a process map, and just carried everything through, and it caught the typical things where you have different communication issues between shifts, let's say. So you have, yeah, the second shift there's less payroll on the second shift, but also there's also more rejects on the second shift, and say. The press brake setup person didn't communicate a certain job attribute to the second shift, and so something went wrong, and so it went to quality. They sent quality, sent it back, and then it was made wrong again. And so the rework, and which is usually not incorporated into the quote, so to speak.
Let's
So
that's the mistake of the not incorporating yield. I don't think enough people try to. I don't think there's enough discipline around yield. I tend to think folks look at yield and they're like, it's not a place to be aspirational.
right,
It's a place to be realistic. Like I can't get over how many people complain about scheduling. It's constant. Like, oh, my scheduling sucks. Oh, scheduling tools are terrible. Oh, someone should build a better scheduling tool. It's like, well, no, your schedule sucks because you estimate terribly in times. You don't account for yield. And when it gets out to the shop floor, it's kind of like everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And there's always getting punched in the face. Like that is manufacturing. Like you got to the shop floor, something's always going to go wrong. But if you don't account
right.
for it, well, then you don't buy enough material, or you don't plan to have to go back and do the rework, or, it's just like you can't be aspirational when it comes to yields. You have
And
to be realistic, and that's okay. Like, and I also think, you know, we have this conversation with our customers, and they will say, well, but if I'm realistic with my yields, I won't win the job. And I'm like, yeah, but would you rather win it and lose money? Like it's such a,
yeah,
like, no, if you aren't going to win the job at a price that makes you money, don't win the job.
right,
Don't take it at a loss. Like the worst thing I see people do is not pay themselves. It's like, you're not
right.
building anything sustainable here. You're going to burn out.
That's exactly what's interesting is I'm literally writing a story about that right now about scheduling, but it's no magic bullet schedule. It's not a new methodology. It's typical finite capacity scheduling you see at any ERP. It's nothing fancy. But what the guy did, I mean, you talk about yield, but he called queue times, where he said, okay, he built at the buffer of the realistic, what it takes, the queue times with the job mix. And it was a
Yep.
rough ballpark estimate. It wasn't anything scientific. He just said, listen, it takes us about 2 weeks to get through engineering for our job mix. It takes another week on the floor. It takes another week on for finishing for this particular product. But anyway, he just assigned the roughness, the job times plus the queue times, and their on-time delivery went from 60% 1 month. Because they extended it out, it went down to 15% another month. So it was abysmal. But the very next month, 95%. because they accounted for reality. Now,
Yep.
are they finished? No, not by a long shot. This is their current state. They say, all right, we did the first things first, on-time delivery, keep customer promises, keep quality high. We need that reputation. Reputation's hard to build. We built it over the years. This particular story, they had a raft of retirements, and it's building back up again, and the shop's really doing great now, which is why they talk to me, right? So that's
Yeah.
how it works, right? But they have a great story to tell, and it's really really good to relay that information. But now they have this current state map, and now they go, okay, now how can we shorten that order to cash cycle now that customers are satisfied, and the salespeople and the quoting personnel have the top line personnel can feed the top line, because the last thing we want to do is improve, but yet still have customers chasing us down for work, and they're having a hard time winning new work because everybody says, nope, this shop it can't deliver.
Yep. And that's, every system calls it something different. Like we talk about cycle times in CNC machining. And I'm like, well, what's the cycle time? And you talk to folks and they're like, well, it's how long the spindle's running. And I'm like, okay, but what about how long it takes to fixture the part? What about how long it takes to swap it over? What about probing in the machine? What about all the things that are, additive to that time? A lot of ERP systems call it efficiency, and you can add a blanket, almost like handicap to your efficiency. Like we operate at 80% efficiency, which means every hour is actually more than an hour. So I think there's a lot of tricks to do it. I just think if people can get to activity-based costing and really understand the steps, and they have their process mapped out, scheduling is one of those problems that I think fixes itself once you fix the front end of the process.
Right. Now, beyond scheduling, beyond all this, kind of bring me through the future of quoting data and AI. We always hear about AI as a solution for everything. It's the panacea, and of course, the reality is a lot more nuanced. But then again, I type into Claude, and it certainly gives me answers that have gotten a lot better in the last year. So it's like, maybe there's something to this.
I think the best way to start this conversation and approaching it is you type into Claude and you get answers, and those answers are very cool and sometimes very accurate. And today there's minimal cost to doing that, right? I am of the mindset that AI is so heavily subsidized today that shops and our business, like we just had this conversation at Paperless Parts. We're a software company, right? And there's spectrums of software companies. There's like token maxing, which is like, oh my God, like spend as much money as you possibly can on AI, because if you're not on the bleeding edge. And then there's like more conservative approaches to like, okay, like we're not going to use this, or we're going to use it a little bit. And we're somewhere in the middle, but the discussion largely is around, got to be really careful in how we build our ROI for certain AI processes. Because if something today is a certain cost, if that cost becomes 10x higher in the next 6 months, are we still going to want to do it? And if we put ourselves in a position where the skill set is atrophied and the humans no longer want to do the work, now we're in a really bad spot. And I think it's kind of like, my analogy is autopilot on airplanes. Like it's a great tool, but if pilots stop learning how to fly in critical situations, that starts to get really scary from a passenger perspective. So I think AI is going to be unbelievably transformative for the industry. I think it's going to be transformative for the world. I think we're yet to see what the true cost benefit is. And I think it'll probably be some years before that happens. Likely, I would say likely in the next 12 months, there will be a reckoning of the frontier models, and we will see, some air let out of the bubble. And then I think people are going to start to get real about what it has to cost in order for those business models to be sustainable. And I think that that's going to have a bit of a reckoning and a bubble pop effect on a lot of businesses out there, businesses that have laid off a lot of people and replaced with AI, thinking that there was a good ROI there, who all of a sudden realized that, wow, this AI is costing me more than these people were. And then there's going to be a little bit of a whiplash that takes place. So, I mean, that's my read on how this will all play out. It's kind of like the Gartner hype cycle. I think we're at the peak of inflated expectations right now, and we'll fall into a trough of disillusionment here that is paired with uh, understanding that there's been more money pumped into AI in the last 3 years than into some of the biggest businesses in the world. I mean, you look at Google, Amazon, Meta. The amount of money those businesses raised is dwarfed by OpenAI alone.
Right. And
That's
that's what it's
crazy.
crazy. And what's interesting, I talked to before FabTech last year. There were several investors who gave me a call, and that's why they're so interested in Metal Fab, because it's taking advantage of the AI boom, because they're actually literally building the enclosures for.
The data
So there's
centers.
they're building the data centers, and they're diversified. And so yes, it's a huge part of their pie, but it's not the entire pie. And so it's a bit more sustainable beyond that. I have a similar feeling about it too. I think somebody gave me a great quote the other day. AI, I don't think it can be fork truck certified.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
mean, so you can have amazing automation on your information, which is good because you can reveal amazing bits of data that can drive your businesses in new directions. But then you still have that fundamental aspect of who cut the parts, did we move it, is it shipped, is it out the door, how many dollars did we ship this week? AI is not loading trucks.
yeah, I'm totally with you there. And I think so. The future of quoting, I think AI frontier models, and my co-founder Scott has an article coming out on this very soon where he talks about how, as a SaaS company, it's on us to use AI to deliver value to our customers in an efficient way. And that's really, I think, the value that a lot of software companies will serve. There are a lot of companies out there right now saying, you can build anything you want on our software with AI. Good luck, go do it. I actually think that that's a little bit of a shucking of responsibility. We look at it as it's our responsibility to take AI, to curate it, to make it cost effective in the long run, and make it secure for our customer base and deliver it through our product to create value for our customers. Like that is our responsibility. It's the same thing. I don't think AI really changes anything when it comes to like the build buy analysis. People have been doing this forever. A lot of people that run shops know how to code. They've been, they're like, oh, do I build my own ERP solution? And some shops did that and it worked, and other shops wasted a lot of time on it. And other companies are like, well, yeah, I know how to build it, but why would I do that? I don't want to have to maintain it. I don't want to have to worry about the security of it. So I still think that, like, do I think AI will completely upend and change the market? I don't think so. I think it will be an accelerant for the market if it's employed properly.
It's interesting. I actually came back from a conference where a guy was in a software area of the conference, and he literally built his own production control ERP system, and it was a 15-person shop. And he was commenting on an article I wrote about another vibe coding shop, or actually the guy actually knew some JavaScript and put together a program. But it's a 10-person shop, so it's very small. And he was there, and he was about to invest in a software platform. And I said, "Well, why? You built it yourself?" He's like, "Yeah, but we can't scale. And not only that, I've got other stuff to do." But on the other hand, there are obviously other businesses that are built off homegrown solutions, because that was their entire business model to begin with. And there's room for all types. But at least what's nice is they value, even the smallest operations are valuing the need to organize information in an efficient way. They're no longer rows and rows of filing cabinets. No, come on, let's get the MTRs scanned in, and let's get the records scanned in, so it's all immediately retrievable.
So I read this Harvard Business Review case study when I was in business school about Lego. And Lego if you remember, Lego got into everything, right? I mean, they have restaurants and amusement parks and movies and all kinds of crap. And the company was going completely sideways. Profitability was in the can. Their stock was falling and failing. And they brought in a new CEO. And this new CEO came in and stood up in front of the whole company and he held up a plastic block. And he said, "This is what we do at Lego." And divested everything. Got rid of it, got rid of the amusement parks, got rid of the restaurants, signed big licensing deals for their brand with Disney for the Lego movies, like, but focused all their energy on being the best plastic block manufacturer. And the business soared, absolutely soared. It was an unbelievable turnaround story. And I always come back to, like, know the business that you're in and focus on that. And things that aren't your core business, don't waste any time on. Like, people will go and they will write software to save 50 grand a year. Like, what are we talking about?
Right.
Like, if you're wasting time on that right now, that makes no sense. Go make $10 million on parts. Make really good parts, maximize and optimize your part flow, communicate what you produce, and know the business that you are in. Like, that focus right now more than ever, as volume increases, it will either turn into more chaos or more value.
Right.
Volume doesn't always equal value. There's an opportunity for it to, if people play the next few years right.
Right. And I think that, if one takeaway from our conversation is that no one customer mix is identical to another, no one fabricator is identical to another. Everybody has their sweet spot. That's kind of one of the main messages of the Fab 40. Incredible success, obviously, especially with the data center boom. There's obviously there's some soft areas of the market as well, but data centers driving everything. But every one of those companies on the Fab 40, yeah, they compete head on certain things, but they all have their unique take and they all have their sweet spot and they all have their unique approach to the business. And they've really defined at home that customer base that really works for them to be able to scale, to be able to get that big. And that's how they got it done. So Jason, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Appreciate the opportunity, Tim. It's so grateful that I get to share some thoughts here, and you've done tremendous things for this industry.
Well, thank you, and I have a lot of fun doing it. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Next-Gen Metal Fab, and we'll catch you next time.
The Next-Gen Metal Fab podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.